What I'd like to do is make sure everybody's got their numbers on the top left of their windshield. If you have two drivers in one car, please let the starter know which number is driving.
If you don't have ABS brakes, yes, you can pump a little bit to loosen up the wheels, okay, if they lock up on you. If you have ABS, pumping doesn't help you at all.
So do you think when Ferdinand designed the Speedster, he thought about taking it ice racing? Well, we certainly have. And today on Project Porsche, me and Adam, well, we're going to take all sorts of Porsches on the ice here in Georgetown, Colorado. And that is coming up right now on Project Porsche. All right, Adam, you've been known to give our viewers driving tips and buying tips. So what's a tip for driving, let's be fair, a replica Speedster on the ice? Get the biggest guy possible in the passenger seat.
Put as much weight as you can. Spend $1,000 on some studded tires.
Which we don't have.
Yeah, don't bring a Speedster. But, you know, actually it's just a lot of fun just goofing around. And
so you don't think we'll be winning this two-wheel drive class?
I don't know if we're going to win the overall today, no. But really the trick to ice is slow down.
Yeah.
It's, even though it's
like slow motion.
You're going for time, but the reality is if you blow it, it's all over.
All right, here we go. All right.
We're off with a lot of fury.
And the back end's coming around.
Once you get started though, you know.
It doesn't stop really easily.
No, it doesn't stop, so we just kind of keep her going.
But you know, with that engine over the rear wheels,
you would think.
Yeah, you would think, yeah. This would do really well. Dude, you're up to like 10 miles an hour.
We're like up to 8. I think we're at 8.
Okay.
All right. Now we got the slalom coming up.
Uh-oh.
Which is...
You're full lock. We're going straight. Nice.
We gotta like dodge the ruts here from the ice racing trucks.
Yeah, they dig in. Nice. Through the cones. I am impressed by your driving and handling skills. Or is it just the natural goodness of the rear engine?
Oh, it's gotta be the natural goodness of the Speedster. All right, here's our finish.
Coming in sideways. Woo.
Are you ready for your first time in car?
All right, good work, dude. That was fun. You know, on every episode of Project Porsche, we try to have a little bit of fun, like ice racing in a Speedster, and a little bit of, well, let's call it educational stuff, like how to swap out an IMS bearing on a Porsche 996. Tell me kind of the steps that we're going to go through to get this car in ship-shape order.
Yeah, so the first thing we always do when we get a car like this in is go ahead and get it all cleaned up underneath. You know, we pressure wash it off, we pull the transaxle, transmission gets on the ground, we'll get the flywheel out, the clutch out, and we'll pull that intermediate shaft bearing. So now that we know what we're going to do, the next step is to get the transmission out of the car so we can get a look at the IMS and clutch, make sure the flywheel's in good shape. Paul's going to work with me today and get the cross members out. We've got all the plastic shrouding that's underneath already down. We've got the sway bar down, and we're ready to jump into it. So be most of the rest of the day from here. So as we're getting ready to take out the final cross member on the engine, we want to make sure we get a screw jack underneath it so we don't drop it on ourselves. The Porsche engines are really only held in at 4 points, 2 in the rear and 2 at the front, and so once they're out, it's coming down. The shift linkages here are a cable-driven system on these cars, and they just pop over these ball sockets here. So once they're out, and we've taken out our sensors here, we'll work on our CVs, get those loosened up, and we're almost home. Yeah, so now that we're this far in, we're going to have to make sure we get the slave cylinder off the transmission. It's way up top, and once the car's lifted and you got the jacks underneath, it's a little hard to reach. So, and I think that's going to be the last one. That's it. Double check, make sure all of our bolts are out here. Nothing more frustrating than starting down with it and finding out that it's still stuck. All right, now that the transmission's out, we can see the flywheel here. Behind here is where we're going to find our rear main seal, our intermediate shaft, and our clutch. So we'll go ahead and get this off and take a look. So we can see on this pressure plate here the heat checking from the clutch. It's really pretty common to see in these cars. A lot of them go to the racetrack. A lot of times guys will put a new clutch disc in and won't replace these wear items. And you can feel here that it's actually quite grooved from probably multiple clutches in this car over the years. But we're going to replace this part, put a brand new one in. This thing will be as good as new. So now we've got our flywheel out here. We can see we have the same heat checking on this side of the friction surface. It's a dual mass flywheel. You can see that if I can get it to move here, it's got a little free play in it. It really makes it a lot easier on a street car for a launch. Helps them idle a lot better. A lot of times you'll see in a performance car, a really common update is to move these to a single mass, a little bit lighter, a lot sportier, but this is definitely the way to go if you're going to drive it on the street. All right, so we've got our brand new clutch and we've got our used one. We can see on the one we took out of the car that the friction surface is really worn down. There's a lot more here on this new one, so we ought to get another 60 or 70,000 miles out of this one. So we've been talking a little bit about the intermediate shaft bearing on these M96 engines, and I have a brand new one right here from LN Engineering. Now that we're down far enough in the engine, we can actually see where it goes in this car. So it's behind the pressure plate, behind the flywheel, behind the clutch, and it's right here. Two of the big problem spots in these cars, which you commonly see, are the intermediate shaft bearing failure, which is a catastrophic deal. The engine's pretty much toasted. And then a lot of times you'll hear people talk about the rear main seal leaking, which is just up here where the crankshaft comes through. In this case, the rear main looks really good, and we're not too worried about it. In fact, it probably has been replaced at some point in the past. So we're probably not going to worry about it today. What we will do is get this cleaned up here. We'll pin the engine so that it holds timing. We'll clean it up and then we'll get the intermediate shaft out.
Right now we're passengers. Even though we're standing still, it's done.
Don't be afraid to shift, you know.
Here we go.
Good luck.
Oh, it's going. Oh, it's going. Yeah. Oh, it's going. Oh, no. A full turn. Look at that. Just like the professionals.
Oh, now you're gonna get stuck.
Come on. Come on.
Oh, way to go.
Now we're stuck.
Oh, Dad.
There we go. Now we're rocking it. All right, hop in. Had to get a little bit of a push there. All right, Adam. Thank you very much for letting me
coming out, guys.
Share this experience. You guys are great. And keep in mind, if you guys want some great Porsche friends and some work on your Porsche, check out this man's shop, Renstall.
All right, so now Paul is going to remove the outer flange for the intermediate shaft bearing. There's a seal around it. They tend to get really tight in there, so it takes a little bit of doing to get them out. There's always a little residual oil behind them. The intermediate shaft bearing sits in the bottom of the crankcase here, and so it's basically in an oil bath. The fundamental problem with the stock bearing is that it's a sealed bearing, and so it doesn't free flow oil in and out. The new bearings that we use have been redesigned and kind of rethought a little bit, and they work a lot better. They certainly self-lubricate a lot better than the old ones. So this is what a new outer flange looks like for one of these. You can see that it's got a sealing surface on here, and that seals right to the case, and it goes in dry. There's no additional sealant needed on them. So we can see the difference here between the old flange and the new one. You can see the new one is really a really nicely precision-made piece. It has a wider seal on it. It's another really common leak on these cars. A lot of times people say, oh, my rear main seal's leaking, but the reality is what's really leaking is the intermediate shaft bearing here. So a lot of times in the process of pulling the old bearing, this shaft here can break off. And it's really your mechanic's worst nightmare at that point because it becomes a fishing expedition. It takes a whole series of additional special tools to begin extracting this thing out of the crankcase. So here's the old bearing that came out. You can see that it's a sealed bearing. Both sides are closed off. Where in the new bearing, there is no seal, so that's what we mean when we say it's a free flow bearing. On the outside, of course, it does have a seal, and over here, that way the crankcase oil can freely lubricate the ball bearings in here. The other really good news about the bearing that came out of the engine is that there's no free play in the shaft here. Everything turns really nicely, so in this particular instance, this worked out to be a preventative piece of maintenance rather than a necessity. Probably could have gotten a number more miles out of these cars. They don't all fail. The fail rate is sort of disputed. There's plenty of information out there on the web about it, but it's really hard to say how many of them go bad. We always encourage preventative maintenance on these sort of cars. These are great cars. They're cars that people are really passionate about. And it's disappointing to see them blow up. The problem when you lose this particular bearing, if it fails, it's an entire engine. And that means either making a trip down to your local salvage yard and buying a new one, or having a new one built in a shop, which is undoubtedly a lot more expensive than a few $100 for this piece right here. So anytime you're getting ready to do a clutch, which in a 911 like this is probably 60 or 70,000 miles, it's worth just going ahead and doing it. So now that the new bearing is installed in the crankcase, Paul's going to slip a snap ring in that's going to retain that piece so it doesn't slide back out. It's an important part not to forget. Now that our primary objective, which was to get in the new intermediate shaft bearing, is complete, we can put the flange back on and we'll get started on the new clutch. All right, so we're already on our way back together here. We've got our new intermediate shaft bearing in. We are going to reuse the dual mass flywheel. We went ahead and scuffed it up, made sure that there were no gouging, no grooves in the flywheel from the old clutch. We've got our new flywheel bolts in, and we're going to go ahead and torque these to spec. All right, so it's really important to make sure that you get the torque spec correct on these flywheels. Having a flywheel come off or a bolt break is a really bad day. So now that we're ready to put the new clutch disc in, it's really important to look really closely here where it denotes which side is which. This is our gearbox side, so this is our side towards the engine. We use an alignment tool like this, which will locate it in the pilot bearing and align with the splines on the clutch disc. The last step in this part of the assembly is to put a new pressure plate. They often come in your standard clutch kit. Put the pressure plate on and then a throw-out bearing, and we're ready to slip that transmission back in.
You know, I think pushing that car is the fastest way to get it off the line, really. With these crampons, they've got more grip than that Porsche. You want to push too? So what brought you guys out here?
Haven't done it before.
Yeah.
Always seeing it, so.
So you think the Cayman is a perfect car for this?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see, won't we?
We shall see.
All right. Have fun out there.
See me doing pirouettes.
All right. You know, today's cars have so much technology, right? We're talking about not just increase your comforts like heated seats and steering wheels and massaging seats, but stability control, traction control. They always start, they always run, and that is great when you're commuting to work. But you know, there's something just so pure and magical about a car like this that is a car stripped down to the basics, right? you have an engine, you have a steering wheel, you have a gearbox, accelerator, and brakes, and that's all.
All right, the last thing we have here is our throwout bearing. You can see here this is the existing one in the transmission, and it acts on the pressure plate to disengage the clutch. So we'll pull the shaft out, we'll remove it. It's always a mess, it's always got clutch disc material on it. And then we'll just pop in the new one. Before we're going to put this thing in, we get a little grease pack in our clutch kit, and we'll just lube the splines up here so they go in nice and smooth. The reinsertion of the transmission is probably the most frustrating part of the job for most people. What has to happen is that we have to make sure this shaft and these splines line up exactly with our pilot bearing and our new clutch disc. You really can't see where you're going here. Right? You put the transmission in front of the little hole that you want to line up your input shaft with, and you have to sort of work it up and down. There's really no forcing it. It just has to be exactly right. And then we can always come at it at an angle and sort of tip it in. That works pretty well. So if we can at least... So we'll turn the output shafts from the transmission to rotate the splines so they line up with that clutch disc. Now that we have it all lined up, we'll check and make sure that our splines are engaged and they're tight. They are. They're not free spinning anymore. We can put our bolts in and we can move on. The original factory bearing was a double row sealed bearing.
Right.
It's a roller ball bearing. And the update uses a ceramic type ball bearing, and it free flows so that the crankcase oil can lubricate it.
So it's a little bit more robust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It, you know, all things that rotate should be lubricated.
Yeah. Now, if people want to have their IMS bearing changed, you know, how long does it take? And we're kind of getting special treatment. I understand that because we're doing it on video. But let's say you're a typical customer, you want to come to the shop and have it done. What would you expect to pay, and how long would it take?
You know, it's about a 7-hour job from start to finish,
Yeah.
if you include the clutch in there. So, and since the clutch and the IMS really are duplicate labor, there's no reason to do just one.
So you do both of them?
Yeah, absolutely.
And is the clutch pretty easy to do as well when you're, when you've got the, like, obviously when you got the car apart? It would be...
Yeah, once the worst part about the whole deal is getting the transmission in and out of the car.
Yeah.
Once the transmission's out of the way, you're working on a piece that's right there in front of you.
How do you know when you're driving down the road and your IMS bearing lets go?
Unfortunately, every now and then you'll hear a tale about somebody who heard it going or had a sense in the middle of the night that it was going, but there's really not a warning sign. There's no way to inspect it with the transmission in the car, so you just don't know.
So what'll happen? You're like driving down the road and all of a sudden and your engine just loses power?
Bang, done.
Done?
It'll just stop running right there.
And then, and will it lock up the wheels?
It can. It's unlikely because there's lots of other parts that'll give way before that happens.
All right, so you won't like fishtailing down the road?
No, I don't think so.
You know what impresses me when I look underneath the car is just how well engineered the cars are. Obviously, you work on a lot of different cars,
Yeah.
not just Porsches. But do you see a difference in kind of the thought process that goes into the engineering of the car?
You see a lot of thought process that go into these cars. It's, Porsche has a really strong racing heritage,
Yeah, sure.
and it's our sense, and it's, we don't work for Porsche and they didn't tell us, but you get the sense that the guys who built these cars had an eye on working on these cars later on. Principally, Porsche has always raced the same car they put on their showroom floor.
Is that the same for the Boxer, for the Cayman, for the Panamera, or is it just true for that one, the 911?
The 911's always probably been the most serviceable of the line. You feel that. Some of the early water pumping cars, the front engine cars, are not as serviceable, but with the 987, 996, 986, the Boxsters, they're really serviceable cars.
Now, $2,600 may seem like a lot of money to replace a clutch and an IMS bearing on a Porsche, but think of it this way, like Adam said, it's an insurance policy, because if that bearing goes, you pretty much have to either get a new engine or a new car. As always, this is Roman reporting for the Fast Lane Car, and come back next time on Project Porsche when we actually do some more work on this car and get it ship shape and ready to run. See you next time. Ciao.
If you look here, we have some little rubber bushings, some isolators, and they're just all worn out. The car's getting old.
Yeah, for sure. 99,000 miles.
Yeah, exactly, and a lot of years now.
Yeah. So is there a way we can fix that without getting a whole new part, which we probably don't have access to right now?
So you have your amp here, and you have your CD changer.
Oh my God, old school CD changer.
So what I did is you can pop the head unit, and I just replaced the aux in with the CD changer. Well, that's the thing. The air-cooled people are not interested in any water-cooled Porsches. And then the whole headlight situation, some people can't get over.
Yeah. Like I say, it's hard to tell them from a Boxster.
Yeah.
And of course, Boxsters are, especially this generation, are pretty dime a dozen right now.